right, welcome back to another episode of Bet GPT. Today, Slade is playing hooky. We have our good friend Keil Huber in the studio today. So, Keil, thank you for coming on. Appreciate it.
Good to be here. Appreciate it. And looking forward to it.
So, Keil is our resident UFC and I guess mainly golf expert. He's also been watching a lot of NFL, so I know he's got a lot to say in that regard. But first, just so I don't want to make this awkward here. I kind of just want to get this out in the open. I want to apologize for not going to your bachelor party. I've told you at the last minute that I'm not able to go. I was double booked. I irresponsibly did not check my flight schedule, and I just don't want you to hold that against me on this pod. I'm very sorry.
It's very much okay. I'm riding high after the big dub this weekend that I will talk about later on the podcast. So I couldn't be more forgiving.
Caught you in a good mood.
Yeah,
Okay.
great time.
All right, cool. So let's just spend, I don't know, 5 minutes or so breaking down kind of what we saw in the NFL this past week, and then we can just lead that straight into next week's game. So just pulling up the scores here. Going back to Saturday, Texans beat the Browns 45-14. For those of you listening to our last pod, we had Will Hill on. He gave a couple plays. I can mention those throughout the show, but essentially I was on the Browns. They did not show up at all. CJ Stroud looks like he's the real deal. And I don't, I guess, want to foreshadow too much, but we might as well get into it. Keil, you mentioned prior to the show, Houston is plus 8.5 at the Ravens next week. You think the Texans are live in that matchup?
I do. First of all, I want to say my condolences to you as a Browns fan. I also thought the Browns were going to win that game outright, mostly just because team of veterans, good defense. Houston still seems like you're going to need a little time naturally. Like they have exceeded all expectations this year, but credit to them. I just have in my notes CJ Stroud equals him. Like as far as young QB performances go, there's just not much to. I mean, he was like that inches away from having 4 touchdown passes in the first half. Just kind of unbelievable. Yeah, I really like them to cover next week. I don't love 8.5 lines. That's the kind of line that I typically bet parlay, so I'll move that to 10.5. But because I like that line a little bit better. But yeah, I don't know that I'm totally sold on the Ravens yet. They need to prove a little something in the playoffs to me, and that seems like a lot of points for a team that looked as good as the Texans did this past weekend.
Yeah, and I like how you brought up moving points because they're at 8.5 right now. Even if you teased it 6 points, you could still like cover the 14, and 2 touchdowns is a lot in today's NFL, really against any team, especially like you said with CJ Stroud. The thing with Stroud that's crazy is like every single rookie QB, it seems like always has like they're like, oh crap, like I'm in the NFL playoffs moment, and it doesn't work out for them. It's basically just him and Joe Burrow have been the only 2 guys as of the last several years who have just shown right away that they're ready to go. Obviously, you have Mahomes and like Jordan Love playing well, but those guys were able to sit and learn for a little bit. So that's a little bit of different circumstances there. Other games Saturday, Chiefs, they basically destroyed the Dolphins 26-7. It was never particularly close. Tua, very interesting situation with his contract coming up. He's on his 5th year next year. It doesn't look like he can play outside. And when you're in the AFC, you kind of have to build to like withstand cold weather because you have the Chiefs, the Bills, the Browns, the Ravens, whereas in the NFC, you kind of have to be built for speed with the dome teams and nice weather teams. There's really only the Eagles out on the East Coast. So that's interesting. Do you think the Dolphins are going to run it back next year, or have they seen enough after this effort?
I do. I mean, I have the same concerns about Tua as you do, and I still have concerns with the concussions from last year. I know he mostly went unscathed this year, but it still feels like he's another concussion or two from being pretty much done. But I feel like they've done too much trade-wise. They have too good of a roster. They have to kind of commit to winning now, and I don't know who their alternative would be, so I feel like they're a little bit stuck. They obviously had a lot of trouble beating good teams this year, and I think everyone kind of figured that they would struggle with the cold weather, and they sure did. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Do you think they'll run it back? Because I tend to think they kind of have to, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm pretty sure they own their first round pick, and that'll be in the mid 20s or early 20s. So there's no like for sure if there ever is a for sure franchise QB, it's not going to be in the 20s.
Mm.
So that's tough. I know you could potentially try to swap him, but the only player that's available is like Kirk Cousins, and I know you're a big Kirk Cousins guy. Kirk Cousins was great this year. He's obviously a 1 year older though, coming off a pretty big injury. It's going to be interesting to see where he winds up though.
Yeah, that it seems like a little bit of an odd fit there too. I mean, I don't know. It's just I guess I've never really thought about Kirk Cousins in Miami, but yeah, I think the problems definitely go beyond Tua. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I like Tua. I'll root for him, but yeah, just as far as cold weather goes and
Yeah.
consistency, it seems like he's not the kind of guy who's going to win you a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree. They'll try it again next year, and it'll probably be the same result. So I guess keep that in your back pocket. Get ready to bet against Tua in the cold weather next year. Pretty much, you can probably lay whatever the number is because this one wasn't close.
Hmm.
You mentioned the Dolphins haven't been good against good teams, and I totally agree with that. However, they did squeak by the Cowboys like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Turns out the Cowboys might not actually be good though. So the new franchise QB, Jordan Love, had a phenomenal game. Packers win 48-32. Dak threw a pick six, threw another interception that was returned. It's like the 15-yard line. I guess I'm not totally shocked the Cowboys lost, but in the fashion they did, I thought that was pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm glad to be proven wrong on this one because as you know, I'm a Commanders fan and thus a Cowboys hater. But I was on the Cowboys to cover this weekend, and that very much did not happen. Um, yeah, Jordan Love looks really good. I don't know if I saw this meme that was really funny, and it was like the video clip from Goodwill Hunting, and it said like the Green Bay Packers drafting Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and it's the part where Matt Damon is like, you know how easy this is for me. You know how I wish this is a joke to me, which is pretty funny. But yeah, I don't Cowboys choke again. I don't know what to say. I really as we talked a little bit about before the pod, I kind of thought this was going to be the year they turn the corner. It's one of those things that there's always these teams that I don't buy. For example, like NBA this year, I'm always a Celtics skeptic, but this is the year that I think they've turned the corner. I think the Drew Holiday and Porzingis acquisitions were really good. I felt the same way about the Cowboys. It just something seemed to click a little bit more this year, and Dak seemed to take a step forward. You get to the postseason, and it's a whole different ball game. And again, brings joy to my heart, but did not foresee that coming.
So they have. I'm looking at the cap hits for Dak Prescott. The past couple of years, he's been 17, 19, and 26 million against the cap. In 2024, he is 59.4 million against the cap. I'm guessing they're going to restructure that somehow and push it off. But they can't, if they cut him, dead cap is 61.9. So that's obviously not even an option. Not that they would do that anyway. So this was kind of like their biggest opportunity to make a run, I think, if they wanted to, because they're going to have to start paying people. They have a lot of talent on that team. Micah Parsons is going to demand a huge contract coming up. So yeah, for the Cowboys haters, I think it was a pretty good day for you.
Yeah, and I thought Dak was potentially 3 quarters of the year through the year. I thought he was potentially MVP. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, the cap hit's it's a good point. You gotta it gets tough. That's why you're at such an advantage if you're a team like the Texans right now who isn't, or the 49ers who's not paying your quarterback anything. And you have that like 4 or 5 year window if your rookie quarterback's really good, really fast, where you can win a lot of football games.
yeah, you're exactly right. That's the way to do it. And I guess leading into that, the Rams did that with Jared Goff a few years ago, and then once I know they did pay him for a season or two, but then they got rid of him. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts where they say that like someday we're gonna get to a point where we're gonna have a rookie QB, and he's probably gonna win a Super Bowl in like year 3 or year 4, and they might just like straight up cut him or trade him because he'll be good, but he's not going to be like $50 million good. He might be like worth 30 or 35, but that's whoever his agent is not going to let that happen because of leverage and whatnot. So Rams did end up getting rid of Jared Goff, and Jared Goff led the Lions to their first win, I think since 92, I believe. So yeah, our Lions win 24-23, by far the best game of the weekend. I was on the Rams plus 3.5 and a little Rams money line. But I can't really root against the Lions. That was awesome to see. It was an electric atmosphere. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I was on Lions money line, so that one squeaked by. But
Nice.
I guess one thing I gotta say is shout out Puka Nacua, elite waiver wire pickup for me. First week of the fantasy season. Sucks that there can't be or I guess there technically could be, but that there won't be offensive rookie of the years because CJ
Yeah.
Stroud should win, but Puka, I feel like 8 out of the last 10 years would potentially be a deserving winner. So it's just one of those years where you have two really good rookie offensive players and only one can win. Yeah, happy for the Lions. Happy for Dan Campbell. I think the last podcast or maybe the last couple podcasts, you guys have talked a little bit about how Dan Campbell feels like he can get a little too reckless. And I tend to agree, but I think he's an entertaining character. I like football coaches who have entertaining personalities, and like Mike McDaniel, and Dan Campbell is definitely one of those. So I'll be rooting for the Lions again. That's a fan base who's been through a lot and has not seen a lot of success over the years, but good to see him finally get something off their back.
Yeah, Dan Campbell, I know, yeah, we have given him a hard time lately, and I will give him credit though, no matter what, like the guys do play for him and he does get them up for every single game. And their OC Ben Johnson has been awesome. He's really dialing it up. He's using all his weapons. Amonra's been great. David Montgomery was a huge add. Laporta came back and scored a red zone touchdown. Laporta is so important on third downs in the red zone. I think that probably next week and the rest of the playoffs, if they keep going, they're probably not going to run him on, I guess, too many routes or target him just because they don't want him to get re-injured. They just want to save him for those bigger moments, and he did step up, which was huge. The Lions, I don't want to say this reminds me of the LSU situation, but I think it's somewhat similar where it's like Coach O was like a guy where he could get anyone hyped up and get him ready to play. Then they had Joe Brady as the OC with Burrow and Chase and Justin Jefferson kind of running the show. So I think it may be like adjacent to that or somewhat similar, but that just kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. I hadn't really thought about that before, but yeah, how about the Iowa to 3-star recruit tight end to like all pro NFL player within a year or two pipeline? It needs to be studied. I don't quite understand it. I
No,
mean,
I don't.
credit to them for just
Yeah.
developing tight ends really well, but especially when at other skill positions, like there's I think Tyler Goodson's the only Iowa running back in the NFL, and Amir Smith-Marsette's the only wide receiver, and both of them see limited playing time. And then you just have this one skill position that it's like, oh, like at half the guys who are all pro every year from Iowa, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and on a betting perspective, I'll always love Sam Laporta because the NFL draft this year, I was literally all in against CJ Stroud going to. I had him 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, all at huge numbers. And right before the draft, I don't know if you're following it, but he shifted like a day before he shifted that he was going to go to, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. My saving grace was I got Sam Laporta 25-1 to be the second tight end drafted. So that got me to just about break even, thankfully. So yeah, thank you for reaching for him, Dan Campbell.
Oh, dude, I think I did a reach bet on him to be the first tight end, which is probably like 40
Mm,
or 50 to 1, thinking it had no chance, and it actually kind of being somewhat close to hitting.
yeah, yeah, because I guess Kincaid went first, right? Um,
Which, I mean, he's been a stud too,
He's yeah.
so
Yeah, so he
totally
he scored he
understandable.
scored yesterday. Bills won 31-17 against the Steelers. Kincaid went 3 for 59, which has been big because Stephon Diggs has not looked like himself lately. He hasn't been that true wide receiver one. I don't really know what's going on there. But Josh Allen looked good. They're unleashing him in the run game, which I think is super critical. for their success. This one got a little close late, but Bills ended up hanging on in the end.
Yeah, even when it got to a touchdown, it never really felt super close. I think like even when the Steelers were down a touchdown with like 10 minutes left in the
Yeah.
fourth quarter, they were still like plus 700 live, which indicates that Vegas is like, okay, you guys, we don't think you guys have much of a chance. The Steelers plus 10.5 was like my lock of the week, and that did
Mm.
not prevail. I kind of thought that the weather would be, I didn't think, I mean, I probably should have foreseen this, but credit to Bill's Mafia for shoveling the snow so well. I thought that it was going to be like a blizzard, snow everywhere. And then that obviously didn't end up quite being the case, but it did work out. I have a Bills future that I bet like the prime time they were 50-1 when they were 6-6, which it totally makes
To
sense because
to win
like,
the Super Bowl.
yeah, they were 50-1 at one
Nice.
point, and I didn't really think at that time they'd even make the playoffs, but I'm like, this football team's too good to be 50-1. So like,
Yeah.
it was a small amount in hindsight. Again, hate to Tuesday morning quarterback, but
Yeah.
always like, oh, I wish I would have bet more on this. Now I'm like, oh, okay, I wish I would have maybe thrown a little bit more on that. But yeah, I do have a Bills future, so kind of have a rooting interest there for them right now.
Nice. Yeah, and I have a Bills future as well. I know on our NFL season preview, I gave out the Bills as my Super Bowl pick. I got them 10-1. So throughout the year, they started at 10, they went down to like 8, then they went up to 50, and now they're down. Let's see where they're at right now. Live odds, the Bills are down at plus 490. So they've kind of been all over the place. Not a ton of value there now, but if you can kind of snipe some of those in season, you can get some pretty good value and things to play around and hedge with as we get closer.
Absolutely.
Next up, I think is this is the last game. Last night, Bucks beat the Eagles 32-9. My good buddy Baker Mayfield got the job done. He's had more playoff wins than the Browns have had over the last 20 years, so that's great to see. Um, the Eagles are a mess. I think they finished the year like 1-7 because they started 10-1. Jason Kelsey just announced his retirement after the game. Um, I Vibes are bad in Philly. Vibes are not good.
Yeah, vibes are real bad. I just in my notes I just have WTF in all capitals. I don't really know what happened there. It's just I tended to think that I think they were what 2.5, 3.5 point favorites against Tampa. I thought that they would cover that. I was like, I know they had a bad finish to the season, but I feel like we see this once every few years where you have a team that stumbles into the postseason, but they're talented enough, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, things kind of come back and click at the right time.
Yeah.
Clearly did not happen. It's like right out of the gate, they seemed hopeless and dysfunctional. And I know there were some people who were saying Sirianni was on the hot seat before this game, and I think afterwards that's especially the case. And I mean, it's not totally out of the realm of reality that we have three new coaches in the NFC East next year, because I think McCarthy, the Cowboys are going to have to think long and hard about Mike McCarthy, and I think the Eagles are going to have to think long and hard about Sirianni, and obviously the Commanders are in search of a new coach. So Brian Daboll may be the only incumbent headed into next year.
And he's going to get fired in the next couple of years too. So
I don't know. I think he's a good coach. He just that Daniel Jones contract is gonna. He might get fired, but it's not his fault. That Daniel Jones contract is going to destroy that franchise. Sorry, Kev.
I was going to say we should have had Kev call in live to get his Daniel Jones reaction. It's probably worked though. But yeah, the Eagles, they started the season 10-1. I think we have to give Sirianni a lot of credit for that, because it turns out them losing their OC and DC and Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon to other head coaching opportunities in the offseason. We can't pretend that's not a huge deal. So
Mm-hmm.
especially with the success that we've seen out of Steichen in Indianapolis with Gardner Minshew, I'm looking forward to kind of see how that translates with Anthony Richardson next year. And then with Gannon and Arizona, that's still kind of an unknown. They looked, pretty frisky at the end of the year, but without Kyler Murray, it's kind of hard to evaluate them as a team and him as a coach. But
Well, I would say even the Eagles 10-1. They kind of it was not just like the Vikings last year, but they should not have been 10-1. Like I watched both games they played the Commanders, and they probably should have lost both of them. I don't know quite what happened to their secondary, but their secondary was a dumpster fire all year. And I think sometimes as the season, I mean, you just kind of regress to the mean, and it's like you win all these games you're not supposed to win, and eventually you just kind of run out of luck. And I think that might have been what the Eagles were. I think even at 10-1, they were probably just not as good of a football team as their record indicated, and that got uh, shown more towards the end of the year.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm looking at their schedule. They squeaked by the Commanders in OT. They beat the Commanders again by a touchdown a few weeks later. But I want to look at this stretch here. They beat the Cowboys 28-23. I remember that was like the Fox afternoon primetime game. I was on the Cowboys. That was ridiculous. Like Dak fumbled at the 1 yard or got whatever it was. He stepped out at like the 2 yard line. So they had another goal line stand at the 1 yard line. Everything went wrong. Eagles won that. Eagles beat the Chiefs the next week. The Chiefs threw like a deep ball to MVS and he dropped it. Um, and then the Eagles beat the Bills in OT the week after, which is probably around the time that you got that future in. And I
Mm-hmm.
think they hit like what was it? They hit a 59-yarder to tie the game to go into OT. So, I mean, credit to them for getting it done, but that kind of stuff isn't really sustainable.
Yeah, well, and also credit to Tampa because I know that that game was probably more about the Eagles being bad than them being good. But like Baker's been a great story this year. I think if the comeback player of the year had a little more, I think you guys talked about the comeback player of the year on the episode with Will Hill last week, and I talk about this with one of my coworkers. We talk a lot of football, and he had a future on Tua at one point for comeback player of the year, and we talk about how there's just no like strict criteria for it.
I
I think
know.
if there were more strict criteria, I think Baker's potentially the runaway comeback player of the year. Obviously, DeMar Hamlin's a crazy story. Could totally understand giving it to him, especially since the Alex Smith year when Alex Smith only played a few games. They gave it to him. I think that kind of set the precedent that is like, okay, if you like die or almost die, like you're probably going to get the comeback player of the year. And now I know Joe Flacco's in the mix, but Baker's, I mean, a great season, great, good performance by Tampa yesterday. Credit to them.
Yeah, and it's hard because yeah, like you said, there's no criteria. Like Geno Smith won a couple years ago, and he came back from like just it's like a sucking essentially, just not being good. And Baker last year had between the Panthers and Rams threw 10 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, whereas this year he had a 28-10 ratio and threw for 4,000 yards. So that's definitely come back to me. I know I think he was like third in odds behind Flacco, but Flacco's sample size was only 5 games. Everyone knew that. It just kind of was like that Cinderella story.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone likes that and the narrative behind it. But I do think Hamlin ends up winning. I remember when they posted the odds before the season, Hamlin was only like minus 300, and everyone was talking about how that's a lock. Like if you laid that before the year, you're probably sweating the whole year just because Hamlin
Mm-hmm.
only got in and I think he played like 15 snaps so far this year. But I was playing Madden yesterday, and I went for a 2-point conversion, and DeMar Hamlin intercepted me in the end zone. So credit to him for making the play in Madden.
I was gonna say that's like one more statistic than he actually recorded all season, but he's like the Rudy Rudiger of like go in there, kid, make him proud.
Well, I think they want to keep him because he can hit like he can get his NFL pension or his retirement or whatever after 5 years of service. So the Bills are
Yeah,
doing the right thing. It would also be a PR nightmare if they're just like, all right, we're cutting
that's
you. So
yeah, and I think there's a lot of pressure on them to keep him, and I totally get it. I think they're probably making the right move. I think that there's something they could probably accommodate to like get him his pension early if I'm sure they could maneuver that because I know the Dodgers have a guy who has had mental health issues and they've made it a point to like pay for his health insurance even though he's been away from the team for years to try to get him the help he needs, which credit to the Dodgers for that. That's a great move. And if
yeah.
the Bills were to do something like that with DeMar Hamlin, but like you said, I think if they cut him, it's a kind of a PR nightmare. So they're kind of stuck in. But who knows? Maybe he's because I mean it's a weird situation because even before that situation, he was a guy that like didn't really play that much, and I don't think necessarily was going to be probably be on the team much longer if that didn't happen.
Yeah, he was a 6th round pick, 212 overall in 2021. So Credit to him for making the roster and being on the field. But a lot of those 6th round guys don't necessarily stick around too long. But he's under
Mm-hmm.
contract for one more year. We'll see what they end up doing with it. But yeah, all the best to him.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about just the Texans Ravens line first. We both kind of like the Texans somewhat in that matchup, whether it's a tease or putting them in some sort of parlay there. Next game up is Packers Niners. Packers are 9.5 point underdogs on the road. I think that's a lot as well. I know the Niners are a well-oiled machine, but Brock Purdy's biggest game this year did not look good against the Ravens. Um, Christian McCaffrey's been a little bit banged up. If on the first or second series, he kind of gets nicked up again, I think that the Packers can take advantage of that. I would definitely not be like laying 490 on the money line. I just think this is too much. I think it's closer to a touchdown, so I think there's a little bit of value on the Packers.
Yeah, I tend to go the other way on this one. I think San Francisco will win by a couple touchdowns. Packers as good of a win as they had against the Cowboys, and as many points as the Cowboys scored that were in garbage time. That's like, what does this really matter? They did end up giving up 32 points. I don't think they're going to throw up anywhere close to 48 again. I think there's going to be a little bit of a regression, a little come back to earth moment. I like the Niners to cover on that one.
Okay. Maybe we could have a little collab play of the over 50, because if you think the Niners are gonna play well, and I think Jordan Love's gonna play well, we should be able to see some points.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Next up, Bucks 6 point underdogs at the Lions. This is a pretty good, I guess, teaser opportunity if you like the Lions straight up. I'm sure everyone in America will be on that, similar to how everyone was on the Cowboys last week. So what could possibly go wrong there? Um, I don't know. I mean, Bucks have not been good. They didn't look good 2 weeks ago against the Panthers. They haven't looked good in weeks, but sometimes all it takes is one game to kind of kick somebody's ass and light a fire under everybody. So I wouldn't want to play the Bucks right now. I'll tell you that. I'm leaning Lions here, but I don't think I have an official play on this game or anything.
Yeah, I like Bucks. That's another one that, like I said, the like 6-ish, like 5.5 line is not my favorite line. I would probably move it to plus 7.5, just so you give yourself a touchdown there. It's not going to change. It's probably would put it down to, I don't know, one minus 165, minus 170. I think it's worth it for the extra point and a half. But I don't necessarily think the Bucks are exceptional, but I I think they'll stick around. I think the Lions will ultimately prevail, but I don't know that I think the Lions have shown me enough for them to be that big of favorites in a playoff game. But yeah, we'll see
Yeah.
what happens on that one. I tend to side with the Bucks, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Lions. And the other thing about the Lions is they tend to have a habit of letting other teams back in games. So I could see the Lions getting a quick 2 touchdown lead. The live line might be like -7, or Lions minus 17.5, and there could be some good value on the
Yeah.
Bucks cover there, because it seems like the Lions, they can start off hot and then make some dumb mistakes here and there and give up a touchdown or two. They'll end up winning in the end, but they might let the other team get back in the game. So I could see
Yeah.
that being another opportunity to make some money live.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Like, if you don't have a good feel about a game, like if you're a recreational better like we are, like if we bet every single game just because it's playing, like we're not going to like be profitable. At least I'm not, speaking on behalf of myself. Like, so sometimes just watching a drive or two and getting a feel of the game can definitely help you out a lot. So I would suggest that. All right, last game, Bills Chiefs. This is by far the best game. Bills are 2.5 point favorites at home. This is Mahomes' first road game in the playoffs. I don't really think that's going to phase him, but that's just kind of funny to think about how they've always had those AFC title games at Arrowhead. So I don't know. I mean, everyone knows that game from like 3 years ago where the Chiefs came back and beat the Bills at the very last second, because the Bills left like 21 seconds on the clock or whatever it was. Like, I know both teams have been thinking about this. I tend to lean the Bills here, but I don't know. It's very hard for me to bet against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs because he's the best player on the field, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm leaning towards the Bills, and I think part of that's just bias since I have that future on them. I'm like kind of feel obligated to roll with them, so I kind of feel like I have to disclose that. I mean, it comes down to it. Like the Chiefs are, I don't know, they've just had those mistakes in their receiving core this year. Kelsey's taken, I mean, if you look at the numbers, Kelsey, I don't think he's taken quite as big of a setback as people are making it out to be, but he has looked a step slower nonetheless. And
Yeah.
obviously he may have some distractions off the field, but we hear enough about those on NFL Sundays. But I am a big Rashee Rice fan. I think we can. It's getting close to where we can stop saying that Mahomes has no receivers narrative because Rashee Rice looks like he's going to be potentially a legit number one. But past that, I have questions. Credit to Pacheco. I mean, he's kind of revived their run game, and just watching him play football is fun because he looks like the angriest person ever when he's running the football, and it's very entertaining. But yeah, I tend to think the Bills will get the best of them this year. They're rolling, they're on a hot streak, and I know the Chiefs looked really good a few days ago, but playing against the Dolphins and cold weather, I don't know. I don't want to read into that too much.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And you brought up Rasheed Rice. I thought it was so funny when Caitlin Clark went to the Chiefs game. She took a picture with him of all people. Like, where was like her picture with Pat Mahomes? It was just Rasheed Rice. She could see into the future.
Yeah, that was a very random like collaboration. Did they like jersey swap or something? I remember seeing
Yeah, it's
that
so
picture.
weird. Like, all right, whatever. I think she gave him a box of her cereal too. So whatever.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
because I think I looked it up and I was like, oh, did they like maybe go to the same high school or something? And there was like no connection whatsoever. I like literally investigated to try to find out like how they knew each other, and it just there was no
So
no logical connection.
he was like 80-1 to lead the playoffs in receiving yards, and I think that, like, one of us should have recognized that, or just like, I don't know anybody who was on that, but, like, as you mentioned, like, he's kind of their budding wide receiver one, and if they are successful, chances are it means he's gonna have a big game because someone's gonna have to step up, especially if they're taking Kelsey away. Um, so yeah, he had 100 plus yards in that game. I did make one NFL future. Let me know your thoughts on this. Most rushing yards in the playoffs, I got Lamar Jackson at 40-1. So they're at they have one less playoff game, obviously, because they run by last week. But I just thought that that might be decent value considering I think they're going to win multiple games in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's good value there because the thing is, if both buy teams, which the 49ers are on the other side, um, and I think there's a good chance that the 49ers make it to the Super Bowl. If you have them and the Ravens, then the bye week basically isn't even a disadvantage because everyone's going to have at most the same number of games to get those rushing yards. So I think that's great value at 40-1.
Yeah, so right now Aaron Jones is at 118. Um, they're 10-point underdogs to the Niners. So he could be knocked out. Christian McCaffrey will be entering the picture. Pacheco has 89. James Cook has 79. One of those guys is getting knocked out. Josh Allen has 74. You probably could have got great value on that. Rashad White, 72. Devin Singletary, 66. So I think the door's open for Lamar, but I just wanted to throw that out there and keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I think as far as value plays go, I think that's a really good one.
Do you have any value plays in terms of Super Bowl futures? I know they have a Super Bowl MVP market out there too. You got any plays for that, or are you still just keeping an eye on things and maybe wait to fire on something next week?
I bet, and again, this is might be a little bit of a like I'm rooting for you, so I'm going to throw some money on you, even if it's maybe not like in my best financial interest. Like I'll just sprinkle something. I threw down a little CJ Stroud Super Bowl MVP bet. At the time, the Texans were 17-1 to win the Super Bowl, and he was 20-1 to win Super Bowl MVP. And I'm like, if they win the Super Bowl, the odds of him not being Super Bowl MVP seem like crazy. So the fact that you can get an extra plus 300 there seemed like a no brainer to me. Now
Yeah,
they're at like plus, now they're 22-1 to win the Super Bowl. So I guess something changed over the last couple days. In hindsight, I'm guessing I couldn't find what the Super Bowl MVP numbers were, but I'm guessing that puts him at like 25-1. But I already put my bet down. But yeah, that was my one. again, I don't know that I think the Texans are going to make it that far, but it's like if for whatever reason they go on a storybook run, he's going to be the Super Bowl MVP. So figure
Yeah.
I'd throw a little bit at it.
Yeah, no, I like that, and that's just like any way you can to get value. Like Mahomes is 8 to 1 to win to win MVP, and the Chiefs are only 7 to 1 to win it themselves. Like if they win the Super Bowl, it's going to be because of Mahomes. It's not going to be because of somebody else. So
Right.
yeah. Um, Whereas I think one team where it's not necessarily QB is probably the Niners. I know everyone's been kind of iffy on Brock Purdy all year. Brock Purdy's plus 370, McCaffrey plus 800, and here's one I like: George Kittle 100 to 1. I could see Kittle ripping off like a 3 touchdown 100-yard game, and that potentially getting home. But there's so much risk involved there. I wouldn't suggest throwing more than like $5 on something like that.
Yeah, this is a little off topic, but speaking of 3 touchdown games, I don't know if you follow like BR betting on Instagram, but they always like throw out some crazy tickets. And I remember like during the Cowboys Packers game, I saw that with Ferguson with 3 touchdowns and Aaron Jones with 3 touchdowns. I was like, okay, there's no way. I was like, there's got to be someone out there with a parlay of those two with 3+ touchdowns. And sure enough, it was like $5 to win 7,500. And
Oh
you have
my
all these people like commenting fake ticket. Do you think they like manufacture those tickets to like get people to bet, or do you think that they're real? Because I'm like, I think it's real. Like, I think somebody probably was just like randomly decide. There's got to be one person that threw that down.
I think it's real just because there's so many degenerates out there who are like just like betting hundreds of bets per day. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I think it has to be real. But if it weren't real, I do think they would still manufacture something like that and take an opportunity to promote themselves because everyone sees a huge part and they're like, oh, I want to be the next guy to hit that. I've never come close to anything like that. I don't expect to ever have anything like that happen to me, but yeah, that'd be really sweet.
Hmm.
But all right, yeah, I don't really have any futures right now. I think the winner, the Bills and Chiefs, is very live to beat the Ravens if the Ravens get there. Lamar's only had one playoff win in his career, so he kind of got to deal with that. I do want to bring up. I don't know if you follow Cleve TA on Twitter, but he's one of like he's half analytics, half betting. So he's a fun follow here, and he brought up a tweet um, this morning where um, he said, I've mentioned this in the past, but Super Bowl teams all have been in the top 10 in explosive pass percentage since 2018. So just quickly going through this list: Chiefs, Eagles. Chiefs were 2, Eagles 1. Bengals 5, Rams 2. Tampa Bay 4, Chiefs 5. Niners 1, KC 9. And then the Rams Patriots Super Bowl, they were 3 and 9 respectively. So everyone towards the top. The remaining teams this year, so the top 10 have made it every year. The remaining teams this year: 49ers are 1, Detroit Lions 2, Houston Texans 3, Tampa Bay 7, Green Bay 10, Baltimore 11, Buffalo 19, KC 21. So,
Interesting.
yeah, Ravens, I know they're just out of it at 11, but Buffalo 19, KC 21, not even close. Can you as a fan and a sports bettor, can you look past that because they have Josh Allen and Mahomes, or is that actually something that you think is an issue?
I would love to look past it, but it feels like every time they throw one of those statistics out, like there's smoke, there's fire. Like I don't know if you know about, I'm sure you do, like the Ken Palm statistic when it comes to
Oh
college
yeah.
basketball champions. It's like something ridiculous. Like 19 out of the last 20 have been like top 15 or top 20 in Ken Palm offense and top 20 in defense. I'm probably getting something that wrong in the
Yeah, there's
numbers,
some
but there's
formula, yeah.
there's some formula. It basically predicts every champion, and there's like so there end up being like 8 to 10 teams, if that make the tournament every year that, according to KenPom, have a chance to win. And like last year, I was like, I don't know. And again, my buddy for work, he was on UConn all year, and they were in that category. And sure enough, UConn won. So it's like whenever I see one of those statistics, and it's like the data is that uh, consistent, I,
Yeah.
I tend to think that there's got to be some meaning there. Obviously, like you can kind of find a statistic to support like any narrative you want to if you look deep enough. But a lot of these that like when they get publicized and stuff, it's they tend to continue in that direction more often than they don't.
Yeah, so that's like one of those formulas where probably for the rest of our lives we will forget it up until March until we hear it again. So we'll try to file that one away and bring that up on the pod here in the next couple weeks because there's definitely going to be some good value with college basketball. I haven't been watching a lot yet. I've really just been watching a lot of Hawkeye games, but I definitely want to get into that more because there's nothing like March Madness.
Yeah, shout out to the Hawks. They're kind of turning the corner right now.
Yeah, we can. I think we're wrapped up with football. If you're good, let's talk. Let's talk a little Hawkeye basketball, and then I know you want to talk PGA Tour, and then a little bit of UFC. So speaking of Ken Palm, I just looked them up. Uh, Iowa's 43 overall, so they're slowly moving up the list. When I hit Control, I have to search for Iowa. Iowa State popped up at number 12, which is kind of crazy. I
They're
did not
solid
think.
this year.
Yeah, I did not think they'd be that high. But Iowa is adjusted defense 114th overall, and offense is 15th overall. So that's about right.
Predictable, yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. Fran just got the win to be the winningest Iowa coach of all time. Are you happy with, I guess, Fran as a coach overall? I know the results have been good, at least in the regular season. It just hasn't translated to the postseason.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's tough to win in the postseason. Like if you're a routine tournament team, and again, it's like not like Iowa's a blue blood basketball program, and it's one thing I've been really impressed with about Fran is like finding the diamonds in the rough, like the Murray twins, like not being recruited by pretty much I don't think anybody else in the Power Five and having to go to a year of prep school and then being first round draft picks. Luca Garza was like 100 out of 100 on the ESPN 100 rankings and went on to be one of the best college basketball players in history. I think they have a really good young team this year. I've been impressed with how Fran's developed players and again found guys that maybe were overlooked elsewhere and have turned into really good college basketball players and churning out at this point like an NBA player a year, which in the history of Iowa basketball has not necessarily been a regular occurrence. So
No.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I have plenty of good things to say about Fran. We'd all love a little bit more postseason success, but when there's so many teams and it's hard to advance in college basketball when you get to the postseason. And they've had some talented teams that I think did underperform a little bit at the end of the year. But, it's one of those things like the grass could always be greener, but overall, I've been pretty happy with. I think he's in however many years he's been to the NCAA tournament like 75% of the time, and like 3 of the 5 times he hasn't been to the tournament is his first few years, which you can't really even blame him for that. He was following up Todd Licklider, who's like one of the worst college basketball coaches in history, in my opinion. So
Yeah. No, things could definitely be a lot worse. So we need to be grateful for what we have for sure. I think my biggest beef in the last couple years was just when they lost that tournament game to Richmond. Like that was absolutely ridiculous. I know teams get upset. Like Purdue's lost in the first round like 3 years in a row. Um, so that's something to look out for. But they've just had so much talent, and when you have like the player of the year in Luca Garza, like you gotta make a run with that. But
Well,
you know,
yeah, and that was coming off the Big Ten tournament win too. So that like it really felt like there was
yeah.
some momentum, and then all of a sudden just dead.
Would you
Yeah.
have traded that Big Ten tournament title for an Elite Eight appearance? They
Yes.
lose in the Elite Eight.
100%.
Yeah,
One hundred percent.
yeah, I would too. I would too. Okay, well, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. They beat Minnesota last night. They have a pretty winnable schedule coming up, other than Purdue next Saturday. My wife and I are going to an Iowa bar next Saturday morning for some brunch, so I'm hoping that they keep it somewhat close so I can try to enjoy that game.
Nice. Yeah, I tend to not think it's a tournament team this year. Like I think if they do squeak into the tournament, they're overachieving, but they're also very young, so like my expectations aren't like that high. Like I'm optimistic about the future with the players they have. I just think they're maybe a little too young this year.
Yeah, yeah, I tend to agree. All right, what direction you want to go next? PGA or UFC? You take the reins. It's your show now.
Um, we could just touch on UFC real quick, because the only like a fight that I have like a strong opinion on this weekend is the Strickland Duplessis fight, the
So
main
that's
event.
that's that's the main event Saturday night.
hmm
Yeah, UFC 297. All right, yeah. What do you think on it?
I tend to think, like I was telling you, I tend to think the fight's gonna go the distance. I don't. Did you watch the Strickland Adesanya fight when Strickland won the belt?
Yes, yes, I did. Yeah, so that was back in September. Strickland won in a decision after 5 rounds. Yeah,
Yeah, for anyone who like hasn't watched that fight, it's like free on YouTube now, and it's just like an awesome fight to watch because you basically watch it feels like David versus Goliath. Like you have a guy who's like at a complete athletic like disadvantage, and he just kind of dominated this fight, and you can kind of see Izzy like shocked and confused throughout because like it seems like he just didn't expect it, but um Strickland, like he's such a good defensive fighter. I like this fight to go the distance. I think you said for Strickland to win by decision, it's like plus 310. That would be
yeah,
my
yep.
ideal play. I don't know enough about Duplessis to have like a strong opinion on like who's going to win. I would think it would go the distance, but I was telling you before the podcast that I was looking at Duplessis' like fight background, and when he was on the South African promotion, he won all his fights by submission. But since he's been in the UFC, he's won like all his fights by knockout. So it makes sense. I think you said it was like plus 710 for him to win by decision. So that makes sense because the assumption is if he wins, he's going to win by knockout. But I don't know if I see Strickland getting knocked out. Like the dude just doesn't get tired. Apparently he spars like every day, which is like horrible for your brain and like probably just a death wish for CTE at like the age of 35. But
It's good for your legacy, though. Come on.
in the meantime, like that dude it just has like a tank that doesn't run out. So I tend to think that fight's going to go the distance. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it.
I would lean Strickland here. I just because his win over Adesanya is just like the biggest win amongst the two guys. I think that just holds a lot of weight for me. Duplessis, he's beat Whitaker, Brunson, and Darren Till in his last 3 fights. Like nothing, to sneeze at or anything. But I just think that Adesanya is a world class fighter. So winning that, I guess means a lot to me. So I'll probably be on Strickland. I'll probably just wait to see closer to the fight to see if the odds change at all. Strickland's minus 138, Duplessis plus 108. It seems like when we get to these main events, when it's kind of 50-50 like this, the underdog gets bet a little bit more. So if I can get a better price on Strickland, kind of closer to Bruce Buffer announcing the fight, I'll probably be on that. But if not, I'll just be enjoying watching that one Saturday.
Yeah, and one other thing, going back to the Strickland Adesanya fight, one thing I will say that benefits Duplessis here, in my opinion, is I don't think Strickland's catching anyone off guard anymore. Like people know he's legit. I think
Yeah.
that was one of the biggest issues. Is he would just again to me during the fight he was just like confused, like oh like I did not realize this guy was this good. I don't think that can happen again. That was a one time thing. Like people know Strickland's legit now, even though he's a little unconventional. Like he just throws punches and plays defense. He like threw very few kicks in that Adesanya fight. He doesn't do any jujitsu if he can avoid it. But yeah, I don't think he's catching anyone off guard, but I still like it to go the distance.
So you think Strickland wins in the distance, but if it doesn't go to the distance, would you lean Duplessis then in a
Yeah,
knockout or submission?
yes,
What
absolutely.
so they have round by round up. Duplessis to win in round 1 through round 5. I'll just read it off here. Plus 600, plus 850, plus 1100, plus 1800, and then to win in round 5 plus 2300. Do you think it's gonna go to the later rounds before he ends up taking him out, or would it be early if that were to be the case?
It's tough to tell. I would say the round three value is pretty decent
Yeah,
because I
11 to
think
1.
once you get to like round 4, it's like, okay, then when you have a guy with a crazy motor who can just play defense, and especially if he feels like he's got the advantage in the fight, like that's what he's going to do. He's not going to like fight stupid or anything.
Yeah,
Um, guy who fights very smart. But yeah, I think there's potentially some value in the round 3 finish if anyone's leaning towards Duplessis.
sure. Okay. Good deal. All right. Well, yeah, so everyone, is that in Vegas, I think?
It's
UFC
in
290.
Toronto. I think
Oh,
300's in
Toronto.
Vegas.
Okay, Toronto. Okay, cool. So then the time will not be an issue because some of the overseas UFC fights sometimes they're fighting at like 2 p.m. in the afternoon here in the stateside. So that should be normal time, 9 or 10 p.m. Central East Coast time. So
Mm-hmm.
looking forward to that. All right. We have the American Express golf tournament. Scottie Scheffler, who we've bet on this podcast multiple times. Every time we bet on him, he sucks. Even though he is the best golfer in the world, at least in my opinion. He's plus 550, Cantlay 9-1, Schauffele 11-1, Sung J M 20-1, Justin Thomas 22. Those are rounds out the top 5. Just I guess give us like what's the last 2 weeks in Keil Huber's golf betting portfolio? What's that been looking like before we get into this?
Okay, so 2 weeks ago at the Century, and I'll get into like my betting strategy for golf later. But 2 weeks ago in the Century, I hit Chris Kirk at 150 to 1. Only bet $1 on him, but still, we'll take my $150.
Sure.
And that was the longest golf bet I've ever won. I believe previously the biggest long shot I've ever hit was Brian Harmon at the Open Championship this year. I got him at 100 to 1. Also, bet
That's
a
a
dollar.
touchy subject considering how much we were going off on Brian Harmon only being a JDC champ, and that's all he had on his resume.
Yeah. Yeah, but that was previously, I think, my biggest long shot. So I was riding high off the Chris Kirk win. But then this past weekend, old Grayson Murray at 350 to 1, who I also picked,
Crazy.
uh, quickly bested my 150 to 1. So I don't know if it's like the year of the recovering alcoholics or what, but backstory: Chris Kirk and Grayson Murray both have a little bit of a difficult past and have overcome some challenges. So I don't know if the PGA script writers were just trying to like make things interesting early in the year, but both come from like kind of a similar background that they were kind of down for the count and out of it and big time comeback stories. But so 350 to 1 is now the odds to beat for me. I don't think that I'll probably beat that anytime soon because it's pretty rare that you see someone from uh, that big of a long shot win on the tour. Um, but so it's been a pretty good couple of weeks for me. So I'm hoping to go for the three-peat.
Yeah, no, that's such a good feeling hitting a golf outright. I remember 3 or 4 years ago when Brooks Koepka was on the PGA tour still. He was like coming back from injury, and I got him like 70-1 to win a tournament. I just had like $20 on it, which was awesome. So
Oh yeah,
definitely hitting those is a lot of fun. But like you said, someone like someone has to win it too. Someone from 150-1 odds or higher has to win. Like they have to beat these elite level guys. So they have to catch Scheffler and Cantlay and all these guys on an off day. So definitely not an easy task. Are you staying towards the top of the board this week? Or are you going shooting some bullets on the underdogs? Where are you at with the American Express?
plenty of bullets on the underdogs. And I'll get in my strategy. The one thing, it's funny you mentioned Scottie Scheffler. I have in my notes, stay away from Scheffler in all caps. And whenever I've listened to you guys on the podcast say something about Scheffler, I'm like, no,
It's
no,
always
no, it
me. It's
hurts
never
my heart.
Slade. It's always
And
me.
this is no slight to Scottie Scheffler. He's a fantastic player. Last year, he had the seventh best scoring average on a season in PGA Tour history, and the number 1 through 6 are all the same guy, and it's Tiger Woods. So, and on top of that, Scheffler is not a very good putter. So, like, if he gets his putter figured out, like plus 550 is good value. Unfortunately, he does not have his putter figured out, and the PGA Tour is just so deep. To be betting a guy at Scottie Scheffler's odds, which are usually plus 500 to plus 700, he's got to be winning like one every 5 tournaments, and he's
Yeah.
getting a lot of top tens. And there's potentially some value. I don't know what his odds this week are on top 10, but there's potentially some value in the top tens. But anyone under like 10-1 odds in a PGA Tour tournament, I just steer clear from, unless you have some kind of an odds boost or something. It's just I don't think it hits enough to where it pays off um, over the long term. My strategy basically is I typically bet $20 to $30 per week, and that can be whatever it is based on like what units you want to use. But I sprinkle it across like 10 to 12 players, um, and most of them I don't really think I can win, or don't really think are going to win. Like I would not have thought that Grayson Murray was going to win last week, but he won a Corn Ferry Tour event last year. I thought that there was a lot of value at 350 to 1, and when you're betting a guy at 350 to 1 for $1, if you hit one of those, you're covered for like I'm I can bet 350 to 1, 350 to 1 guy in every tournament for the next like 30 years. And it'll take
Yeah,
that long for me to end up on the losing side at this point. So I'm a big
yeah,
advocate of like throwing loose change on some long shots. Like I'll kind of go through my categories and explain them as I go, if that's all right.
sure.
Um, so I have the loose change category, which is guys that like I bet like 50 cents to $1 on and just have ridiculous odds and are almost certainly not going to win. But the washed vets category, this week I have Kevin Kisner and Brant Snedeker, just guys that were good ones and aren't good anymore. I like to hold out hope for Kevin Kisner because I like him, but at this point he's pretty much a broadcaster. But they're like 800 to 1 and 1,000 to 1. Um, I don't know. I throw 50 cents on them. Probably not going to hit. Almost certainly not going to hit. But you never know.
So are you like even if they don't win, are you also betting live like on Sundays? Like if Snedeker gets in the final group and there's like 12 holes left, like are you like watching and ready to hedge?
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. So I hedged on both my winners this year. So I live bet Grayson Murray for a little extra money, and then I hedged on Ben On and Keegan Bradley before the 3-man playoff. So I was at least going to
Yeah.
make a profit. I also hedged the week before, um, but at that point, Chris Kirk was like, at the point I was going to hedge, he was such a heavy favorite. I think I only had to blow like $10 on a hedge, and I was going to make like at least $100 no matter who won. And there were
Nice.
also a couple times last year where, for example, at the match play, I had Cameron Young to win, which is the one PGA Tour tournament that is always going to be easy to hedge on if you get a guy in the championship, because it's pretty much going to be a toss up going into the
Yeah.
final match. Hedged on Sam Burns, made some money there. Also, the Canadian Open, Nick Taylor ended up making like a 90-foot bomb to win. Still not over that. But I had Tommy Fleetwood, who came in second, hedged on Nick Taylor. So ended up winning some money that week. So yeah, I certainly like that. That was a good point, that I certainly make some money hedging if one of these big long, especially, and sometimes it's hard just because like if you have like 5 or 6 guys in the mix, and that's kind of what I ran into until the playoff, is there's really no good way to hedge, and you just kind of got to ride it out and see what happens. But if you get to like a 2-man playoff or something, that's like the dream hedge scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. You brought up Tommy Fleetwood. Is he ever going to win on the tour?
I think so, man. That's one of those guys that I'll get in one of my other categories
Sure.
that
Yeah.
I'll
Keep
get
going.
into eventually. Is seriously, he has to win eventually, and it's guys that I bet on like weekly until they win, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. But like I used to do that with Cameron Young. I've kind of got off the Cameron Young train. I also used to do that with Maverick McNeely. I threw a couple bucks on him this week. Right now, and I've done it with Tommy Fleetwood for a while. Right now, my guy is JT Poston, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with JT Poston this week. Even if he doesn't win, there's so much value in him at 35 to 1. He has back-to-back top tens to start the year. He just shot 61 on Sunday of the last tournament, and he has uh, 8 top 10s in his last 11 starts, dating back to my favorite non-major tournament, the good old John Deere Classic. So 8 top 10s in the last or 8 top 10s in the last 11 starts. That's like a Scottie Scheffler number, but you're
Yeah.
getting him at 35-1 instead of
Yeah.
5-1. One thing is he can be infuriating if you're like keeping up with it live, because he'll be like near the top of the leaderboard and then have like a double bogey and then like kind of fall out of contention and then shoot like 63 on Sunday. And you're like, okay, like how are you not winning every week? And he's also plus 320 for a top 10. So again, he's got a big top 10 streak. There's some value there. But yeah,
You just keep talking because I'm putting in my JT Poston future right now.
okay. That's my big bet for this year. I'm like so high. Also, his caddy lives in Nashville, and he bought me a shot at a bar once. So like, shout out to JT Poston's caddy if he ever sees this. He's chill.
Good karma right there. Good karma.
And I'll kind of backtrack to some of my other categories. I have my guys who can win category. I have Nico Echevarria at 400-1. He won an alternate event last year. Just worth throwing $1 on. It's guys who have like proven to me that they can win in the last couple of years, and I'm like, there's no reason if you've proven to me you can win on the PGA Tour recently, you should be 300 or 400-1.
Yeah.
Camilo Villegas 300-1. I hit him at 70-1 in an event a couple months ago. Another guy who's a really good story. Had a young daughter that like passed away and took some time away from the tour, had some injuries, was a really good player in like the late 2000s era and is like kind of coming back. So another good story. And then also KH Lee won a couple times in 2021 and 2022. He's 200-1. I have my due for a dub category. Okay, I guess this is more where Fleetwood fits. But I have Adam Schenk there. He's never won on the PGA Tour, but he had 2 runner-up last year and 7 top 10s. He's 80-1. And then I have my let him cook category, which is just a personal bias one. And that is Minwoo Lee. If I'm plugging my laptop real quick. Sorry.
You're good. Talking Minwoo Lee, I've bet him before to win. It was a couple majors at Spreadopedia on Twitter is always on Minwoo Lee, and you can always get him at crazy odds in the majors. And he's a really solid player. So I like that.
He's super young. His social media presence, if you don't follow him on social media, I recommend it because he just makes these like edits of him and it's like someone saying let him cook in the background. He nukes the ball. He's like not very big, but hits the crap out of the ball. And he just signed the first ever PGA Tour endorsement deal with Lululemon, so he's got a little more money in his pocket. He's going to be playing loose this week. Yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about Minwoo. Really good young player, fun guy to root for. So, yeah, those are my picks for this week. But yeah, JT Poston is number 1. I will continue to bet him until he wins because I think it's a matter of when, not if, he gets a dub.
Yeah.
This winter-ish to spring season. But yeah, that's my guy.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure to tweet that out on the pod or on the pod Twitter account. Make sure everyone's on that. It's JT Poston. I've seen him as low as 25-1 at some places, but if you shop around, there are 35-1s out there. I just had 35-1. So hopefully we can get that one home or at least have him in contention to make it interesting Sunday afternoon. Real quick, before we wrap up, my guy that I'm going to be betting on, or I have been betting on until he wins, is Ludvig Åberg, the young Swede, I believe. He has he won yet? I don't know.
Yes, he did. He
did end up winning.
He won a tournament in the fall. Oh, this is a touchy subject too because I almost bet him the week that he won. I was like on the fence. He was, I think, like 14-1.
It was the RSM. Yeah. So November. Yeah.
He's another guy who he's talented enough. He's a good bet every week at the odds he's at right now. I think he's going to be closer to that Scottie Scheffler territory at some point, but like right now he's got some value.
So I bet I bet him to win the Open, the PGA, the US Open, and no Masters though. I got all those at 40-1. I just threw $10 on all of them. I think he's going to be alive to potentially win a major. It's probably not going to be this year, but I think down the road you'll be hearing plenty from him.
Yeah, I threw him in my long shot all majors parlay. That's like $1 to win 122,000, and I have him winning the PGA because a lot of guys I
Yeah.
feel like get their first major at the PGA. So
Yeah.
yeah, I will. I'll be a very rich man if that goes according to plan. But yeah, there's a reason that high of a payout is not going to hit.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we appreciate your golf insight. I think it's a lot more intelligent to listen to you rather than me being like, just bet Scottie Scheffler and collect your money later, because that clearly hasn't been working. So we'd love to have you on as like a recurring guest for the four majors, give you like 15 minutes just to lay out all your categories and talk about kind of your leans and whatnot if you want to do that again.
Yeah, absolutely. Really enjoyed it. And again, no shade to Scottie Scheffler. I respect the heck out of your game. It's just the odds makers, they like you too much. That's the only problem here. And like also like figure out the flat stick, but still a much better putter than me. So again, can't throw too much shade.
Yeah, thank you for calling that out, because Scotty definitely does. He is an avid listener of the pod. I do know that.
He's
Cool.
gonna be DMing you from his burner account, being like, why? Who's this guy on here talking trash about me?
Exactly. All right, Keil, it's been a pleasure having you on. We appreciate you stepping in for Slade. For the listeners, we'll have Slade back next week. We'll break down the football action. Just a couple more weeks left until the Super Bowl, and then we're gonna have to shift to, I guess, more college basketball, March Madness, golf. We got MLB starting up a couple months from now. I guess, Keil, while we have you, real quick. So obviously, this is a Pro Cubs podcast. You're a Cardinals fan. Who do you think is winning the NL Central? We'll end the show on this.
Man, my baseball keeping up with days are pretty behind me. I don't think the Cardinals have done enough in the offseason. They've added a little bit of pitching, but it feels I'm not a big fan of Ollie Marmol. I don't know that I think he has the respect of the clubhouse that he needs to have. Who's the popular? I want to say maybe like the Brewers, but I
The
couldn't even tell
Brewers,
you
the
who's
Brewers have
the
been trending
favorite.
down now since the Cubs got counsel from him. The Cubs I think are plus 220, and the Reds are kind of like the hot team. So it's pretty even amongst like the Cardinals, Cubs, and Reds. And then there's the Brewers and then the Pirates. So it should be pretty
Yeah,
competitive.
yeah. I'll
Yeah.
preface this by saying I'm totally uneducated on the subject. I'll go with the Cardinals as a homer pick. I'll pick the
Yeah.
Cubs to get last as like an anti-homer pick, even though I know that's not actually going to happen.
Yeah.
Like Craig Counsell, loved your batting stance, but stay in your lane, buddy. Like should have stayed in Milwaukee. It's colder and windier in Chicago. Like I don't know what you're doing, but yeah, I'll go with the Cardinals
The
just for.
money. The money. He's got more money down in Chicago. Yeah.
That's true. I probably would have run to Chicago for the money as well. So
Yeah.
no judgment to Craig Counsell there.
All right, cool. Well, if you want to get your MLB knowledge up, just continue listening to the pod. We'll be talking plenty of it amongst other sports. So, yeah, Keil, we appreciate you coming on. Thanks everybody. This has been another episode of Bet GPT.